If you're really serious, Prime Minister Trudeau, about what you say about reconciliation, let's sit down and talk.
Tonight, survivors from one of Canada's most brutal residential schools calls on Ottawa to get real about reconciliation.
We want to prevent our daughters, our granddaughters, and our families, our children from becoming a statistic. And so that's where we got to begin. We have to look at healing and safety.
The Ontario Native Women's Association looks back on 50 years of fighting the good fight. And we pay tribute to one of our own who passed away last summer. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Survivors of St. Anne's Residential School joined an NDP Member of Parliament today demanding a meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. APTN's Fraser Needham has what's new in their fight for justice.
Evelyn Kortmatz attended the press conference on Monday and says if Trudeau is genuine about reconciliation, it is time to put his money where his mouth is.
If you're really serious, Prime Minister Trudeau, about what you say about reconciliation, let's sit down and talk. Otherwise, it's just hollow words that echo in the hallways.
Kortmatz knows all about claims of abuse at St. Anne's Residential School not being taken seriously. She attended the school in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and her independent assessment process hearing in 2015 did not go well.
I walked into this room where I had my IAP hearing. We all introduced ourselves. My adjudicator said to me, I'm French Canadian. I took a tour of Fort Albany, so I know the grounds of St. Anne's Residential School, and he also told me he had tea with the nuns at St. Anne's Residential School. So right there and then, I knew I was doomed.
Kortmatz says she signed countless consent forms giving the IAP access to her school records. She also provided numerous witnesses that could document her abuse. The documents never made it to the hearing. The witnesses were only contacted at the last minute, so they couldn't attend.
So to me, the whole IAP process was a scam. And then a month or two later, I can't remember now, I was denied because I was called a liar, because my story was so unbelievable.
Charlie Angus says, in the end, the only people who were actually served by the hearings were the abusers.
Well, we learned that actually what it protected was the perpetrators. It protected the Catholic Church. It protected the federal government. So all the documents that the federal government was forced to turn over on St. Anne's, the documents blacked out the names of the perpetrators. They blacked out the names of criminal abusers, child rape, child abuse, torture.
In an emailed statement, a spokesperson for Indigenous Crown Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett says the government is committed to a review of St. Anne's claims to see if additional compensation is warranted. The review is being conducted by Justice Ian Pitfield. I'm Fraser Needham for APTN News, Ottawa.
Thanks, Fraser. We want to know what you think about the St. Anne's survivors having to keep on fighting for recognition and compensation. Here's how you can continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News and join the conversation and see our latest stories. Well, this is a busy Monday for Nunavut residents, and doubly so for those in Iqaluit, with two things going on that are pretty hard to ignore. First off, it's Election Day. Nunavut's Legislative Assembly is holding a territorial election. There are 22 seats in the territory. 5 MLAs are running unopposed, leaving 17 seats up for grabs in the consensus-based system that's in the Assembly. And in Iqaluit, well, the water crisis continues. City officials are draining the water system, hoping that it will remove some of the fuel that got in there. Residents haven't had tap water for 2 weeks because of this. Joining us now from Iqaluit is our Kent Driscoll. Ken, let's start. There's lots to talk about in Iqaluit today, but let's start with the current water situation. What's going on there today?
Well, Melissa, the latest is the Army has arrived. The Canadian Armed Forces, they've brought in a reverse osmosis water filtration plant. Basically forces the water through a membrane and it catches contaminants that way. They're scouting locations to put the plant right now. They hope to be producing water, hopefully by the end of the week, and that plant can put out 50,000 liters of water a day. But the biggest challenge for them, it's our weather. The military's general experience with these sort of water filtration plants has been in warmer climates than Iqaluit. And cold's a difficulty multiplier. I mean, simply put, everything's harder to do in the cold.
You know, I understand that city and government of Nunavut officials briefed the press about the water situation Friday evening. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, they sure did, Melissa. And what's beginning to emerge is a timeline of who knew what and when. The question is, when did the Nunavut Health Department know about the water, and what did they do after they found out? The Health Department contacted the mayor for an emergency meeting about the water on the morning of October 12th. Now, you only do that if there's a problem with the water, right?
Right.
So residents weren't informed until 3:30 that same day, when Iqaluit's mayor, Kenny Bell, he told residents to not drink the water on Twitter. The health department didn't put out their do not consume order until 6 o'clock that evening. So I asked about this a few times on Friday, Melissa. The health department saying they would have acted sooner, but since the mayor had already tweeted about it, they figured they'd wait and do up a press release in all 4 official languages instead of sounding the alarm the morning that they knew of it. So it seems like people would have drank that water for at least hours while the health department knew it was poison. Now, there is a much longer version of this story up on our website, aptnnews.ca, and I explain it at length over there.
Perfect. Okay, well, now let's switch gears over to the territorial election. What should poll watchers have their eyes out for this evening?
There's a few key races I'm keeping an eye on, but there's a race in Rankin Inlet that's exceptional. You have Health Minister Lauren Kusagak. He's taking on former MLA Tagak Curley, and Curley is a legend by any Nunavut political standard. He goes all the way back to the Nunavut land claim. Former MLA, former cabinet minister. That's a race right there. And the premier's coming back, but he's running unopposed. Doesn't mean he'll still be premier. You see, Nunavut's election, the real election, in a lot of ways comes after Election Day. Under the consensus system, the MLAs come here, all the MLAs get together, they pick a premier. Then they pick a cabinet. The premier picks his cabinet ministers out of that. So there's going to be some deal brokering coming up following this election, and that's always some good political drama, Melissa.
Well, we look forward to watching it all unfold, and of course are appreciative of you and your perspective on things from up there in Iqaluit. Thanks for joining us, Kent.
Koyanamik, Melissa, anytime.
We need to take a break, but here's a story we're working on for you.
I'm Lee Wilson, and coming soon from northern British Columbia, the BC government and the Tahltan Nation are working on the first consent-based agreement using the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Mining company Skinner Resources are operating within the new framework.
This is going to be, we believe, an example, help people understand the value and the power of consent and how that is able to unlock, prosperity and value for local communities and for the province of BC.
This story coming soon on APTN National News.
Over the weekend, a fire broke out on a cargo ship just outside of Victoria, BC. An intense storm then caused the ship to list to one side, causing 40 shipping containers to fall into the Pacific Ocean. APTN's Tina House has this story.
This video was captured 12 nautical miles away from where the MV Zim Kingston was seen spewing smoke as 10 shipping containers were in flames. It's still not clear how the fire was started, but the Canadian Coast Guard has confirmed that 2 of the containers were carrying 52,000 kilograms of a toxic material called potassium amexthantate. However, officials are saying there is no danger to human life at this time from the toxic smoke.
Air quality monitoring teams are ensuring that there are no readings that indicate hazardous air quality for communities.
Along with the fire, their cargo ship lost 40 containers into the ocean due to the ship listing to one side from a heavy storm. Some of the containers were seen floating nearby, but others have submerged underwater. Only 8 of those containers have been retrieved. And with Hurricane Category 3 winds hitting the west coast today, cleanup efforts have been hampered. Chief Harvey Underwood of the Sayout First Nation is concerned.
As Coast Salish people and as Sunchofan speaking people, our way of life is the ocean. And we clam dig, we crab, we fish, and we have places where we go for storytelling out in the Gulf Islands, and we just don't want our way of life taken away. And with these tankers multiplying year by year, you know, I believe they have to have some kind of a monitoring safety precautions.
Although the flames have now been put out, it continues to smolder. All mariners in the area are asked to stay 2 nautical miles away because of the shipping containers in the sea that could be combustible.
The containers are currently drifting approximately 12 nautical miles off the east shore of Vancouver Island in a north-northwest trajectory parallel with Vancouver Island. Based on this information, we do not anticipate them coming ashore, but that doesn't mean there's not the possibility of that happening.
Karen Riston from Living Oceans says despite assurances, she is still concerned about the sea life.
If those containers of toxic material have ruptured and that gets into the water column, it's extremely toxic to marine life. It will burn the gills of fish. It'll scald the throats of marine mammals trying to feed in the area. It could be really quite ugly.
Here in the Burrard Inlet, the tanker traffic will increase from 60 to 400 once the Trans Mountain Pipeline is built, and experts fear it's just a disaster waiting to happen. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Thanks for that, Tina. Well, nurses have been largely credited as heroes throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and now the Canadian Nurses Foundation wants to recognize and support Indigenous nurses. Christine Rick-Buckley is the organization's CEO, and she spoke with Dennis Ward earlier.
Christine, thanks for being with us. Can you tell us a bit about the kinds of challenges that Indigenous nurses are facing during this pandemic?
Hi, thanks so much for having me today. You know, I think that Indigenous nurses, like other nurses, are struggling with the pandemic in many ways. There's statistics out that are showing mental health challenges. There's nursing shortages. There's lots of overtime. There's things like whether or not they have the right PPE. Are they in a safe environment? Are their colleagues safe? Are their families safe when they come back home to them? I think some of the issues potentially affecting Indigenous communities too is lack of resources potentially and not having the resources they need. I know we're looking at supporting some work around translating some documents and resources in languages for different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities to work to help around promoting immunization. I think that's been a bit of a struggle too in some of the communities. Some communities have done really well, but others are still struggling to get people immunized. So I think those are probably some of the challenges that are facing not only Indigenous nurses, but all nurses across the country.
Are there some unique challenges too for Indigenous nurses and for Indigenous communities?
You know, because we support nurses through education and research, and we work closely with the Canadian Indigenous Nurses Association and the Canadian Nurses Association. I don't have firsthand information from those nurses, although, you know, we do support them. We support their education and helping them advance their education. But I think what I've heard from my colleagues is some of those things that I've mentioned about lack of resources, access access to care, potentially a lack of immunization resources. Those kinds of things, I think, have been challenging. But I also think that nurses are often the prime first responder. You know, the first point of contact for Indigenous communities is often the nurse. And so that, I think, is challenging in itself, but now during a pandemic, I can't even imagine how much more challenging that could be, with them being isolated and being the only one there for people to rely on.
How is the foundation supporting them?
Well, we've been very committed to Indigenous health since 2009. We've made it a priority. As I said earlier, we're a foundation that supports nursing education and research, but we've made a particular commitment to Indigenous nurses. We've been able to support 170 Indigenous nurses to date to either become a nurse or to do graduate work at a master's and PhD level. So we're thrilled that we've been able to provide that support. And I think that what we've come to realize is that these nurses that we're supporting often go back to their communities. They feel a very, very strong bond to the communities they've come from. And so once they finish their education, they go back to try and improve the health of those particular communities. Just last year, we were able to provide over $50,000 in educational support to these nurses. And as I said, to date, 170, but over $600,000. So we're really, really pleased that we've been able to hopefully provide some of the support that these communities need.
Christine, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time for us here.
Oh, no problem. Thanks so much for giving us the opportunity.
Well, it's been 50 years since the Ontario Native Women's Association began helping Indigenous women and families. APTN's Michelle Karlenzig has more about the group's beginnings and what's changed in 50 years.
Onwa started planting their roots back in 1971 when a group of women from Thunder Bay challenged the section of the Indian Act which revoked a woman's status if she was not married to an Indian man. Executive Director Cora Maguire-Syret says there's lots to celebrate since then.
50 years. 50 years of advocating, 50 years of, fighting every which way to have voices heard, 50 years of fighting towards, advocacy and systemic justice and, legislative change to the Indian Act, all the way through to programming and services. And, it gives us that moment to just kind of stop and reflect.
The nonprofit organization works to help Ontario's Indigenous women and families, focusing on programming, research, and ending violence against women. Maguire-Syret says Onwa connected with over 40,000 people in Ontario just this past year. She says the most important part of Onwa's work is how it brings women together.
People ask sometimes, kind of what inspires me or what inspires the movement to keep going, and it's those times when we're at a collective, when we are collectively working together and making change and supporting each other in a healthy way. It's really is one of the most beautiful things you can participate in and be part of.
Maguire-Syret says her hope for the next 50 years looks towards the young women who will lead the organization and continue to fight for Indigenous women's safety.
We want to prevent our daughters, our granddaughters, and our families, our children from becoming a statistic. And so that's where we got to begin. We have to look at healing and safety.
Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We need to take another break, but still ahead, we've got your photo of the day. Always great to see what you're all snapping photos of. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Jenna M. provided us with this last look of a summary site. She snapped this sunflower near Winnipeg, Manitoba. Thanks to you, Jenna, for sharing with us. Be sure to send your photos to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting off on the east coast, we got 6 and cloud for St. John's, 12 and sunshine for Charlottetown and Halifax. 3 and a mix of sun and cloud for La Grande River and Inukjuak, 3 and sunshine for Kuujjuaq. Saguenay, 8 degrees and sunny, mix of sun and cloud, and 8 for Quebec City. Ottawa, showers and 9 degrees, 10 and some cloud there in Sault Ste. Marie. Kapuskasing, 6, same with Timmins, cloud there. 4 for Puckawagan and Thompson with a chance of showers. 11 in sunshine for Winnipeg, 10 in cloud for Brandon and Dauphin, chance of showers there. 12 with a mix of sun and cloud for Swift Current, 11 in sunny in North Battleford. Buffalo Narrows, 9 in sunshine. Uranium City, 7 and a chance of showers. Peace River, showers and 8 degrees. Fort Chip, showers and 9. Sunny though in the south, 11 for Red Deer and Calgary, 15 in sunshine for Medicine Hat. 13 in cloud for Kamloops, 10 and a cloud for Bella Coola. 3 with a mix of sun and clouds in Fort Nelson, 8 and cloudy for Smithers, 0 with a chance of flurries for Dawson City, -4 for Old Crow, Wrigley flurries and 0 degrees, flurries for Norman Wells and -4, Sax Harbor -4 with a mix of sun and cloud, Politic -1 and a mix of sun and cloud, Whale Cove mostly sunny, 4 degrees, New Yacht snow and 1, -2 with a mix of sun and cloud in Igloolik, Kenite flurries and 3. Governor General Mary May Simon has been given the first ceremonial poppy of this year's Remembrance campaign. The presentation was made at Rideau Hall this morning by Bruce Julian, Dominion President of the Royal Canadian Legion. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Remembrance Poppy in Canada. Poppies will be available to the public starting on Friday. Well, before we leave you tonight, a brief word about our late elder here at APTN and our mentor, Jules LaValle. Jules passed away back in June. Jules and his wife Margaret were the spiritual foundations for many of us here at APTN and for people working for other Indigenous organizations too. Today at our headquarters here in Winnipeg, we held a brief ceremony to unveil a memorial drum and to hear from his family members. Bart LaValle is Jules and Margaret's son.
I can feel his spirit here with us. I carry it, so I'm very grateful for what everyone's done here.
Well, that is your news to kick off this week. We're so glad that you could join us. If you missed anything lately, you can always go catch up at aptnnews.ca. You can also find our current affairs shows there, Face to Face, Nation to Nation, and In Focus. You can find them as podcasts on our website. Just scroll through the library and download what interests you. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.